Now, let me give you an example of how you might get off to a poor start with an assessment of your writing using APA style. Let's say, for example, you've written a paper about mastering APA style. You begin with a running head, and you can see here there's an error immediately on the very first line. Very often I'll see student papers where they neglect to put in the page number, or perhaps since this is inserted in the top header of a paper, it may be written in a different font. Let's say it may be written in a default font that Microsoft Word might have in its default setting, and this default font is not in the Times New Roman that's required by APA style. So right away you can see you've got several opportunities to err in that first line of an APA paper, and making those errors then would distract the reader, obstruct meaning, and probably lead to more of a focus on writing than we would normally like. So again, back to the sample paper, we strongly encourage you to have this section tabbed in your APA manual. Perhaps print out a copy and keep it handy with your notes whenever you write a paper. And as you construct that paper, refer to the proper format and style for APA. And speaking of the elements, I encourage you to turn to page 21 of the manual, chapter 2. It provides you with detailed instructions on how to put together each section of your manuscript, or a manuscript being a paper. You should read, beginning on page 21, how to construct your running head, the title, your author name, abstracts, introductions, your method sections, etc. So make sure before you write your first paper that you read chapter 2 thoroughly. Also read other sections that relate to proper grammar, punctuation, spelling, verb usage, etc. And I'll give you a very simple example of how you can make an error in terms of your writing. You will read in your textbooks about many different theories. The authors of those textbooks are most likely writing in a different publication style, perhaps Chicago, Turabian, but not APA style. Because they're not following APA style in an academic textbook, they may capitalize the names of certain laws, theories, models, etc. And then it's easy to repeat that mistake when you refer to that theory, that law, that model in your APA paper, and you capitalize that law or theory. Here you'll see section 4.16 on page 102. Do not capitalize the names of laws, theories, models, etc. And here's an example. You do not capitalize, let's say, the theory of associative learning or the model of associative learning. However, if there's a proper name, let's say Murphy's Law, then you would capitalize the proper noun. Otherwise, do not capitalize laws. That's just a very simple example, and one that you will come across very frequently during your writing experience here at Marist College. The APA manual also provides some very important guidelines on how to avoid trouble in terms of ethics. Section 1.10 on page 15 addresses the concepts of plagiarism and self-plagiarism. You will learn during your program of study how to cite and attribute information to authors who have written work that might influence your own ideas. You cannot borrow the ideas or words of other authors without citing and attributing the work that they have produced, the work that might influence your own ideas. Even if you don't quote them in words, the ideas have influenced your own ideas. You're borrowing those ideas. Therefore, you would either cite or attribute that information. So make sure you read very carefully Article 1.10. And the article also deals with a concept that you may not be familiar with called self-plagiarism. Basically, self-plagiarism treats your work that you've previously published or submitted in a course as the work of any other author. You can certainly repeat the ideas that you've developed in your work in any paper that you write. However, if you refer to specific parts of a paper or the development of specific ideas in previous work, then you must cite your own work just as you would citing the work of another author. So read that section of Article 1.10 very carefully, and you will probably see this referred to again in some of the syllabi that your professors may produce in courses. For instance, here's an example from a syllabus that I use in one of my graduate online courses, and it refers to Marist's policy on academic integrity, and I pretty much quote it verbatim. Item 2 in Marist's academic integrity policy explains that if you submit work for credit in 2 or more courses, in other words, you produce a paper or you want to use parts of a paper that you've submitted in 2 courses, then you must have prior approval of the instructors involved. So in other words, if you've submitted a paper in, let's say, a fall semester course, and you would like to use that work for a paper you're submitting in a spring course, then you want to make sure you get permission to do that from both the fall course professor and the spring course professor. If you have any questions about this, check with your faculty member. And to make my final point on the importance of APA style, for those that still contend that we should not be placing so much emphasis on APA style, I would leave you with a few quotes that I've given to other students, and they're right here. You can read them. And I think to sum up that first quote, it's not what we say, but how we say it that matters. In other words, you could have an idea and explain an idea, what you say. You could confound the reader by errors in APA style, and that idea would not be communicated. The second quote from Cardinal Newman, I think it's very clear. Style is the thinking out into language of your work. Again, that language has to be clear, concise, orderly. And finally, getting back to my original point about frustration with APA style, yes, you're going to struggle with this, and as Gustave Flaubert mentions, we can only arrive at the mastery of APA style through atrocious effort, a fanatical and devoted stubbornness. So I encourage you to stick with it. You will be frustrated, but work through that and become a master of APA style.